What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you right now. Tropical Storm Phillipe is approaching the Lesser Antilles as of right now. There's currently some convection over Guadalupe, and the other Leeward Islands are expected to get that in the next couple of days or so. We have the Central American gyre that is potentially going to start organizing and developing either on the Caribbean side of this ocean or the East Pacific side of the ocean. We're not 100% sure yet. A lot of the model's been kind of flabbergasted and flustered with this. We'll definitely be keeping an eye on it as time continues to go on. But in the meantime, we need to talk about Tropical Storm Phillipe as of right now. Here's Phillipe. Current winds are still 50 miles per hour. The minimum central pressure's been fluctuating off and on for quite a bit. It was 1,002, then it went down to 998. Now it's 1,000. We'll have to keep an eye on it. It's currently moving west-northwest at 7 miles per hour. Current location is 17.1 degrees north, 60.7 degrees west at this current time, and the center is very close to the Lesser Antilles. We're going to go ahead and show you the cone as of right now. Tropical storm watches are still in effect for Antigua and Barbuda at this current time. I wouldn't be surprised if they get upgrade to warnings in the next little while, but this thing moves extremely close and is expected to bring some sort of impacts to the Leeward Islands over here at this point. So this is a very interesting and a very concerning situation, in my opinion, primarily because Phillipe has been pretty much defying expectation. First, it was moving west, then west-northwest, then the wind field expanded, then just took a massive jog to the southwest, and now puts the Antilles in play. In fact, tropical storm force winds are approaching Guadalupe and the rest of the Lesser Antilles as of right there. So we'll have to pay attention to all of this as time continues to go on, because this is continuing to be a quite interesting and serious situation. Here's the key messages. Tropical storm conditions are expected around Barbuda and possibly across Antigua beginning this evening, while Phillipe passes just northeast or near the area. Interests elsewhere in the northern Leeward Islands should continue to monitor the situation. Heavy rainfall from Phillipe could produce isolated, scattered flash flooding over the northern Leeward Islands, particularly around Barbuda and Antigua through Tuesday. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's a very interesting situation that we have played out right now. Here's what we have going on. The center of Phillipe has become exposed this morning with convection heavy rainfall displaced to the south and southeast of the center with high northwesterly vertical shear at this point. The initial intensity is still holding at 45 knots at this current time. Strong northwesterly vertical wind shear is expected to prevent significant strengthening in the short term. In a couple of days, Phillipe is expected to encounter a more favorable upper level wind pattern as it moves northwest over the Atlantic. This could allow Phillipe to become a hurricane in the next 3 to 4 days. The intensity forecast is consistent with the consensus aids, although the uncertainty is pretty high for the long range given how Phillipe has so far refused to intensify for days now. Key messages, we already covered that. Here's what we have for the forecast expectance. It's expected to strengthen up to potentially a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm in the next 24 hours, and then it's supposed to stay at that intensity before starting to intensify a little bit more, get up to 65 at 60 hours out, then 70, 72 hours out, then 80, 96 hours out, and then 85 miles per hour, 120 hours out. So this is a situation we need to continue to monitor very, very closely as time continues to go on. We'll have to continue to pay attention to it at this current time. Tropical storm force winds also extend outward 175 miles from the center, so this is a relatively large system at this point in time. We also have, at this current point as well, we also have aircraft reconnaissance going into the storm right now, finding pressures around 1,000, 1,001, 1,002 millibars. And as you can see with the satellite, Phillipe is really exposed at this current point, once again, due to that wind shear. And they're finding flight level winds, once again, around 35, 40 knots or so. SFMRs, they are detecting SFMRs like, 55 knots? I'm sorry, that doesn't happen with 30 to 35 knot flight level wind. So please disregard this as we look into this. So yeah, at this point, they're finding sea level pressure around 1,000 millibars once again. So this thing has continued to basically not exactly struggle to intensify, but it's really just been stagnant, to say at the very least. So that's what we have really going on at this current point at this current point and at this current time. And as we continue to get into this active weather period, be sure to check out my friends over at Prestige Weather. They do individual one-on-one weather consulting catered to your local area. For more information, be sure to check out Prestige Weather in the link in the description down below using the code PREDICTOR for 50% off your first month. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into the models as of right here. Here's the European model to start with. Here's the European for Phillipe at this current point. Not really expected to intensify for the next 36 hours until it exits out to sea after bringing tons of impacts towards the Lesser Antilles and maybe even the Virgin Islands, bringing some heavy rainfall and potential flooding over there. And then this thing starts to kind of just like stagnate and continue its path to the north. There's likely some shear encountering this. That's why it's not really intensifying that much. That is until it gets to the subtropics. There's a high pressure system blocking it from really moving further to the east, and there is some potential of this thing merging with another low pressure system right here and potentially impacting Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and maybe even Quebec up in Canada. So you guys should monitor this in the long term at least. Meanwhile, the European has been showing some low pressure kind of stuff happening in the Caribbean Sea, at least for the short term, so we'll have to continue to keep an eye on it as time continues to go on. So that's the European model at this current time. Next model we're going to go ahead and show you is the GFS. GFS, similar situation to the European early on, although the GFS is still calling for this thing to get maybe down to a Category 2 hurricane before it gets to the subtropics, and then from there this high pressure system kind of blocks it from moving further to the east, and then has this thing approaching Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, maybe to Quebec as an extratropical cyclone. So we'll have to monitor it as time continues to go on. Meanwhile, the GFS has been picking up some potential development in the next little bit in the Eastern Pacific. As we look at this, we'll go ahead and pull up the Eastern Pacific forecast, at least from what we're seeing from the NHC website at this current point. There is something that's over here, but we're looking over here. There's no area of interest tagged just yet. We'll have to keep an eye on it. But even so, the GFS is having this thing as a pretty powerful Category 2 hurricane, just kind of paralleling the Central American coast before making landfall in Mexico and just kind of dissipating like that. And then the GFS is actually forecasting about 10 days out a subtropical system starting to develop and maybe impacting parts of Florida and the Tampa area. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. This looks like it's coming out of completely nowhere. And this is 10 days out, so take it with a massive grain of salt. Even so, we still have a lot of stuff to pay attention to. That's the GFS model. Here's the CMC at this current point. The CMC, similar situation to the European and GFS combined. CMC has us getting down to potentially a Category 1 hurricane at that current point. The CMC is also having some tropical development in the Eastern Pacific that we'll have to pay attention to as time continues to go on before crossing over into the Atlantic and maybe developing into something thereafter, something to monitor as time continues to go on. And we're also looking, according to the CMC, a couple of potential areas of development in the next few days or so in the main development region. So even as this whole Cape Verde setup stuff is dying down, we still have plenty of things that's working for. The wind shear has started to gradually increase on average. However, it's not enough to really stop these systems from really organizing and potentially developing out in the eastern Atlantic Ocean. So that's the CMC. And before we get into any more models, I want to go ahead and kind of look at the shear forecast for the next 10 days to get a better understanding of what's really going on. Yeah, the shear continues to fluctuate across much of the Atlantic Ocean at this current point. The Caribbean Sea and parts of the western main development region over the next 5 days. There is little to no wind shear across a lot of these areas. So if that gyre does want to develop in this part of the ocean in the Caribbean, it definitely can with all the wind shear, with all the weak wind shear and all the warm waters it has going for it. And this continues for the next several days also, which is pretty interesting to say at the very least. So yeah, hurricane season is still alive and it's still chugging along. So I wanted to go ahead and show you that very, very quickly until we get to the next thing. Next thing we're showing you is the NavGem model. NavGem has been kind of the outlier in all of this. The NavGem has this thing push this thing really far to the east compared to the European CMC and GFS, where it had it potentially impacting Nova Scotia and Newfoundland as an extratropical cyclone. but the NavGem also has it as a stronger system as well, around Category 2 intensity, so we'll have to keep an eye on it as time continues to go on. I'm going to be completely honest, I don't think it's going to get to Category 2 strength unless it moves through an area of, like, extremely warm waters to counteract all that wind shear it's been dealing with. I think like 80 miles per hour is the max this thing can go. And even then, that's a bit of a stretch, primarily due to all the shear that's in the area. Last thing we're showing you is the Icon model at this current point. The Icon, pretty interesting, similar to the European and GFS and the CMC, bringing impacts to a lot of the Lesser Antilles, and then starting to move further to the north. You have a high-pressure system blocking it from moving to the east, and potentially bring some impacts towards Nova Scotia as an extratropical cyclone before merging with this low-pressure system in the next 7 days or so. So we'll have to continue to monitor all this stuff as time continues to progress. We'll keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Now we're going to go ahead and show you the actual conditions that we're looking at for the Gyre as well as Phillipe at this current point. Here is what we have for the global sea temperatures. Still 30 plus degrees Celsius where Phillipe is right now. It's really just surviving off of these warm waters, these very historically warm waters at that. And then it's expected to move to the north towards like 29, then 28 degree water temperatures, or 82, 84, 86 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who live in the United States and Puerto Rico who do not use the metric system. And then I'd say about right here is where this thing could stop intensifying, primarily due to the fact that, yes, there is still warm water to the north of it, but the environment just does not look the best going after that. So that's what we have with Phillipe. Now with the Gyre, extremely warm waters across the Caribbean Sea. This thing, with all that wind shear as low as it's supposed to be, there should be no issues with development if it does happen. So that's the global sea temperatures. Next thing we're showing you is the ocean heat content. And with the OHC that we are looking at this current point, the OHC where Phillipe is, it's around 125 to 150 OHC, so a pretty significant value right there. It's just the wind shear that's been really stopping it from developing, and because of that, Phillipe hasn't really eaten that much of the OHC, which is still going to be problematic for the next couple of months or so, primarily because of the stuff that's been happening, and we all know what happens when you have just low enough wind shear in a lot of OHC. We saw that with Lee just a few weeks ago. So that's what we have going on with the ocean heat content. In the Caribbean, things are really interesting. Over 200 OHC in a lot of these areas in the Caribbean Sea. And that's rather concerning to me, because if that gyre does form in this part of the Atlantic Ocean and moves to that OHC, it should have no issues developing or strengthening for that matter. And now we're going to go ahead and show you the wind shear. Wind shear, like I've said, is continuing to fluctuate off and on, off and on, off and on. Where Phillipe is, it's in an area of like 15 to 20 knots of wind shear. Still decent to stop it from intensifying anymore, but still, it's something to monitor as we go into this. And where the Caribbean is, there's not much wind shear at all, especially in the western half of the Caribbean Sea. So stuff we have to monitor going into this week. We'll keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. With that being said, we're closing the video out right here. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us make more videos like these. The goal of this channel is to get more people engaged with weather. Be sure to check out my guys at Prestige Weather Consulting for 50% off your first month using code PREDICTOR. But with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.